He picked up his coffee, looked out the window and regretted it. There, his pesky neighbors and mischievous children poked at the wet concrete. What could he do to make them feel entitled? After all, it was his garden, but say no more now. He must be cunning enough, but he will eventually take his revenge and show them his power. It had always been Tim and his wife's dream to build a new building on the beautiful estate.
It takes some work, but where doesn't it take some work?
The best part is the lush green forest full of birds. Everything was perfect until the neighbors moved in. At one point, a neighbor made an offhand remark about the noise level of Tim's large generator. However, nothing came of it because storms often knocked out power. Then Tim noticed that the neighborhood kids were putting up nets without permission and taking up a third of his garden. Tim approached them and was pleasantly surprised when they politely apologized. He allowed them to use the backyard as long as they stayed there without causing any harm. The contrast between the children and their parents is striking. Little did Tim know that this slight tension would escalate. It was time to work on the garden, so Tim hired contractors and gardeners, transforming his small backyard into a personal oasis. Tim felt something strange while tidying up things in the yard. To his surprise, he saw that his neighbor was building. Not only did the neighbors show up without notifying Tim, and he started giving orders to the workers like he was in charge. He singled out those he thought were too loud and shouting. Orders to keep quiet didn't seem to please the staff. Tim was very interested and he went out to see what was going on. As he approached, he overheard his neighbor criticizing the workers. Say something like, "No, you're wrong," or "This should be done." Tim was getting frustrated. The general contractor noticed that Tim approached him angrily. "This guy says you invited him?" Tim's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, absolutely not," Tim replied firmly, facing his neighbor. The conversation took a turn for the worse when the neighbor pretended to help Tim. "Let them go," Tim ordered. The neighbor stormed off, but to Tim's dismay he reappeared 2 days later. As the workers had left, Tim was looking forward to a peaceful morning. But when he looked out of the window, he saw that his neighbor had come back. This time he pulled up the paving stones he had just laid. The paving stones were still dripping with concrete. He examined them and threw them back on the ground. "What are you doing?" Tim didn't give the neighbor a chance to answer. In a fit of anger, Tim used a string of vivid words. "Tell the neighbors to stay away from his house." The neighbor responded with a middle finger and stormed off. Tim scowled at the mess left behind. "It's time to take action." He called the contractor and asked, "Hey, can you move the tree I'm planting to the back?" After explaining why, the voice on the other end of the line eagerly agreed. The contractor even offered to call the surveyor to make the necessary arrangements. The new tree line will be between the two plots, creating a huge, impassable border. Tim couldn't help laughing to himself when the neighbors came out screaming about the boundaries. He watched with interest as his neighbor walked up and down the new tree line with a ruler. But things quickly escalated. He has got used to using the big yard in his spare time. But he's not happy about being locked out, so he did everything he could to spite Tim. He walked breathlessly up and down his side, gave Tim a smug look and pulled out his phone. Tim's curiosity got the better of him. He wondered what his bold neighbor was doing. He didn't think long. The next day the man was walking up and down the land again, but this time he brought a city surveyor. Surveyors examined the blueprints of the property and the new boundaries. It was very interesting for Tim to measure everything diligently. The surveyor checked the position of the dividing line, examined the plan over and over and shook his head. Unfortunately for Tim's neighbors, everything seems to be in order. Tim has made sure the live fence is within the required 8 inches. The neighbor tried to catch Tim on the handle while he was breaking the law. This was only a warning to him, but it further inflamed Tim's anger.
The original plan was to create a buffer zone between the generator and adjacent properties.
However, the neighbors have crossed the border. Tim no longer felt the need to do the extra legwork for his own happiness in doing it. In fact, Tim was now determined to do whatever he could to annoy her. A few days later, a storm came and the generator started working. The loud noise of the car echoed between the two houses. Tim noticed that Mr. Gaynor's face was red. He can't talk, he can't do anything staring out the window. Tim was pleased with the 1-hour storm. He smiled and turned back to his computer. But as he sat there listening to the soothing sound of the generator, a bad idea suddenly occurred to him. Tim quickly bought a timer and connected it to the generator. He set it to run automatically once a week and once an hour. On Saturday morning she sat on the porch and listened impatiently. He looked at his watch with childlike excitement. The generator started on time as if by magic. Tim waited 10 minutes and then saw that his neighbor had arrived on time. Mr. Ho, in his pajamas and bathrobe, looked angry. He shook his fist at the sky but to no avail. No storm. He shouted over the noise. Turn the damn thing off. I test once a week, Tim replied quietly. The generator broke down recently. He smiled and walked away. The work is almost done. Her garden is finished. Her house has been extended. For security reasons, Tim installed personal surveillance cameras in strategic locations on his property. Although he was not punished, he believed that prevention was better than cure. Who knows if the neighbor will come to fix his latest electrical system? He was satisfied that he had crushed his neighbor, but he still had work to do. She decided to share her story on a popular social app called Little Revenge. Tim described his neighbor's behavior and shared what he did to teach him a lesson. It didn't take long for there to be hundreds of interesting comments. One user wrote that I was once in a thick tree. District dog sitting for a family. They also have a big generator. When it started its weekly routine for the first time, I thought the kids next door were speeding up their motorcycles outside my window. Most users were very happy with Tim's story. They commented, should be nicer to the neighbors. It's always a pain to listen to that song every week. Well done, one user wrote.
Another user said, I'm very happy with this retaliation, however.
Some users pointed out that the field between Tim and his neighbor may not be over.
Many even thought Tim's neighbor might be a threat, and suggested he install security cameras to gather evidence. But Tim already installed the cameras, so they offered some additional advice. One person commented, in this case I would worry that my new tree might mysteriously die due to the anger of my neighbors. Another user responded, he already knows where you can see him standing on the sidewalk.
Make sure the new night vision camera is pointing at a tree at a different angle.
He didn't expect to cameras. In the end, Tim's neighbors didn't retaliate and probably learned their lesson. Tim ended his post by writing, the end result is an angry but powerless neighbor. I have beautiful trees to admire in my backyard. My generator is checked weekly. Nothing can stop it. Thank you for watching.